Chapter 5. "If you are, I'll burn you," the lady in shadow had said, in sheets of black cloaking of the self above herself, as if, as ever, as other, before she disappeared into streaks and evaporated waves and the dream was over. On the temple above the leaf, the lords and goddesses speak and sing and thrum and agree that there are two ways, exceeding in wisdom, that the devil does not and can never understand: the way of the smoke with the clouds, and the way of the earth with the flesh. They swim upstream, he knows, in lanes merging with the pressure of providence, the right of path, and he knows that there are gods and goddesses that wait up in the temple, but nothing stops them, or the children themselves, from toppling over the ridge and the spring of nectar when they succeed, championed in line and leap over their own abodings, the conserved prunings of home, the spigots and crystal geysers of their own settling in salvation, and to burrow down into new, different, exposed territories, thrashing. They give truth for justice, faith for forgiveness, and place serenity, tranquility on high to dominate above cowardice, sleep, and rage, banded resurrection, abandoned revolution, criminal, drifters of deity and divinity, fond of a place for safety, a hearth for stillness, and no blessing, curse, or charge of where to go, when to leave, and what to find. They always had somewhere to go, and it was always somewhere meant for them to stay. On the temple, atop the leaf, if the sun ever went over again, and swung back and forth in its timing pendulum, its clarity of apocalypse, in their blindness they did not sense it. They look up, and the last of the colors of their eyes are washed away in white, smooth and lubricated burns where the aura settles full, long before the point, the sharpness and the needle of a terracing, tearing, gated, and coated heaven. And all they sense is the stop in the motion from the light years away, when light speed was always instant, in an instant, not the less, not by the numbers, or the simpler definite, and thus from here they can see all the way to God in the moment. In that moment, the devil questions the throne, if they'd ever had it, if each of the living here that would not pass without once again being risen from the earth, or each of the already walking, breathing dead that would have its chance to stand as the Lord, and the last of him, of release and of the final retribution at the crown, and coveted, covetous, and what caused and causes them all to approach, if they, through all time and space, eternity and infinity, forever in every way, had seen this coming at every chance and change in its progression, why had they still come here, or allowed this to come to them again? Now they seem like princes and princesses up there in their temple, hiding in their forest, shying from this domination and the conviction of their purpose. The celebration, the rending, the mercy of the peasantry, the selflessness of the awareness if we are to worship value and the end. More single ratios of survival, and they'd be happy to die in the infinite, fallen as another toppled monolith, as they imagine another love would be, harnessed on the links, lofted to vine and rule out, a new bloom for the rotating, slotted roulette of the growth and growth and growth, brown in the night, black and white, and bright in the day. If there were 12 prophets of God, then only 6 of them survived their meetings and conflicts on the battling ridges and landscapes of this world. The children come in rushes and floods. The devil picks up his sword and chops, begins chopping at everything. The first ones that bear up their teeth and leap at him are the first ones to be beheaded, and on the spins, on the swings, full in their purity, those that leapt for the back are flung off, cast broken and scarred and mangled to the side, to slow the masses on their return, if aged, to be rebuked once more severe this time, for the awarenesses themselves and the evidence of their misgivings. He chops all day at the open levitation, against the tickles of little fingers and hands, climbing, reaching for him. The babies have no doubts or any games that they're playing with each other or with their enemy. Not more than space and battling and buzzing and breeding, undeveloped vesicles shooting undeveloped semen into mushes and tangles of their own graves, and it feels more like war now. They are aware of who it is that took them from their homes and dispatches them again. It tells him, in the sense of the rise, that there may be rest and prayer when the sun falls at the end of the day, but it also reminds him that this is that last day. He feels that a heretic is born somewhere, but he cannot find the carve of it. He slashes down into the sloping piles sometimes, but he supposes he can never guess that they're celibate down that deep in the labyrinths of bodies, volcanoes swallowing, leading them down to the core. The ones that are left in the river combust and spatter their organs, or crawl and search through the blood, looking for something like breath as they choke and puke and suffocate on it. Faces bubbling, eyes open and submerged, flat and groveling in the orange waters of gasping, gagging, pulsing lava, and they drown some of themselves for him, looking for the cracks that were once there, the dry sands of the future inscribed before the destroyer came, the most wrathful, the enrager, before their eyes were lifted up to the generation with fangs like knives and to the victory of the most violent. His swings become strokes as the blade slips through the soft and softening undermatting and cuts out to the other side with momentum. A satisfying heft and crunch at the hook of his sword's hilt, at the gauge and fining of the tempered breadth, shearing glisten, coated. Cannibals and thieves and assassins come at him, all with their own expressions, but their distinguishings are little and are made permanent in minuscule foolish flesh, with how strengthless their soul is, no matter how pure and intent from all distances, for how useless its worth in this souled place. The brushes of his strikes become like paintings, spilling and splattering streaks of hues at once, like operations, surgical shiftings through gears of malleable combinations of bone, insulated with sheets of skin, neutrals of cranial concessives, rumbling the stroke, guided. He walks on like that, hikes and kills the waves and ambushes, each in order, as strong as with poise and without need for righteousness, ruthless for the perpetual survival, and spares some of those that remain better buried as he passes them between the trials and testaments, those that impose no threat on the pathway as all the valleys fill, all the crumples and squeezes of mountainous cementing, as the devil lays flat waste to enough blood and bodies that the structure stands and spans out to one stretching pyramid, one pour from the hourglass, settling like air until those that wish to strike at their murderer, their family's murderer, their own children's murderer, the murderer of their genetics, must climb from the very outskirts of the desert, on all horizons, up the steeps of the deformed champions that had died before, enduring the change of altitude, the shortness of breath, the adjustment of the spirit life that runs through the height of its specific elaborance, unplanned in design, strictured in ovular balance, and still leap in defiance of immediate, careless, merciless death to attempt again at survival. He fights his way to the top, slashing and gutting, stabbing and swinging, faithless, and his strokes glide up to the lift of his hands, a dance over the clip and release of his grasp, the spin of handle and into the drop and sloping chop of his other hand, cast back over the dislocation, decapitating as it goes, sometimes through one neck, sometimes through 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 at once, at one swipe, trimming off the outstretched hands and elbows at the obstacle, stretching deep to the hips and centrifuge of the devil, the most defiled, defiler, into the slant of the mountain of bodies that keeps building up and down and out. He skates and demonstrates on the bits that peak up to the top spill out, dances on them in swaying brutality. The weight of righteousness shores and finds a blade's rebound, the twists of its full circumference through bone and flesh and tendon into supremacy, and that, near the being, thousands of little heads, lopped in spittering splits out into the pyramid of blood and skin, roll off. The devil rises until the dust and moisture, this high above the desert floor, into the desert sky, is purple and red, an aura of mist and haze, sightless, and as he leans back, spiraling in full commitment, the horns which are his blessing grow out thick from his scalp and curl and spin with him, if an illusion for this one altitude refracted intended. His clothes are torn down to one black loincloth, tied up on red, tanned skin, carving deep into the climbing shoulders, and an erection thickens from beneath his legs and hardens, orgasms, and ejaculates spurts of agitated seed out onto the wallowing sons and daughters of man, erupting genetics of pleasure from the clouds, splattering on the open cuts and holes of all ends, and paralyzing as he wobbles, lifts the sword, birthing out branched miscarriages, faces of deformed pregnancies, solid, bred expressions conjoined up the hillside, ectopic. Then even remnants evaporate out to dew in this writhing heat, this sauna, to cling and pollinate also these same faces. Whole bulbous heads blooming out from and against and through the spring flowers, somewhere down at the ends of this soaking, already constructed, mounting doom, feeding even what was once desolate, barren and desiccated and dead and dry from thirst, now watered anew with blood. And he looks up, straight into the crisp yellow rip and tear at the point of fresh sky, at the presence of a releasing light, brightening, opening the clouds at his pinnacle and unseated throne, while under its soul, so that it is never as sodden or as heavy as gold, and he hears that the Lord's mission is done, feels its sense overcome him, while the babies overwhelm, weak and frail in each, but soft and undefeated. And then slowed, diligent by the combining pressures of all, he feels them leap and catch, cling and crawl over him, and pull him down by the back, by the shoulders, by the believing and by the neck, by the eyes and ears and hairs and face, by the fingers and hands and arms, tug by tug, many the surrendering fall, and they engulf him, swallowing him, yanking and dragging and piling him down into the pit where they are victorious over themselves, and the multiplied, still in the burning, infertile ocean, regressed, afar, awashed, impercepted, purposed as the impossible. At the temple, atop the leaf, a drift of dew plucks off the end of the leaf. A raindrop for the distant root flakes and flutters the green photosynthetic ripples, whips, and snaps at the ephemeral tower made of air and dust, as of the rock that it walls, shakes with a blow and breath of wind through the stalks of the bushes and lanes of the forest. And as the lords and goddesses stare up at the opening light, setting out in all expansions of the circle, the atmosphere, the glorious appearing, taking over all life from the above, calling them into the arms of the Father, the brightening of the earthquake as it hits their castle, their temple from beneath, a scattering uproar with babbling in their silent, listening ears. The rustle of it percusses the blocks and crumbles, explodes the convergences of wind and mist on a wave, and launches them into the sky,